Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us tonight. My name is Loren Hauck, and just on behalf of Sage, Recovery Villa, Chrysalis Way, Ken Seeley Rehab, we just want to say thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Well, welcome to Chrysalis Way's Sex and Love Addiction Online Symposium number 3. Finding the Balance, a panel discussion on how to find balance in recovery from sex and love addiction. We have speakers tonight from Chrysalis Way's new National Online Sex and Love Addiction IOP, Tiffany Anschutz from Sage Recovery Villa, and Ken Seeley from Intervention 911, and Ken Seeley Group's new Mental Health and Wellness Residential Program, and Ken Seeley Rehab in Palm Springs, California. All attendees tonight will receive a $50 discount to Ken and Eric McLaughlin Seeley's next CCMI Certified Case Manager and Interventionist Training, October 9th to the 11th. Therapists, including social workers, addiction professionals, psychologists, MFTs, and counselors can attend one training for the 20 pre-approved CEs or attend all 5 training mods to become a CCMI. Those 20 CEs are pre-approved for most therapists in most states. These Chrysalis Way online symposiums are so near and dear to my heart, and tonight's topic hits home again. Being in recovery from sex and love addiction since June of 2016, it was a journey for me after treatment on how to navigate dating even a year post-treatment. One thing that changed for me tremendously was my newfound self-love. Dating in recovery, I took those red flags seriously and did not continue any relationship that seemed to be unhealthy. Whereas before, I would just ignore those red flags and settle. So very life-changing. With Chrysalis Way's new National Online Sexual and Love Addiction IOP, people needing help can access the services from the comfort of their own homes, their sober living home, or in some cases while in a substance use disorder or other mental wellness program. Residential program case managers, therapists, interventionists, sober living home owners, etc., could provide clients with this valuable resource if needed, so an individual can also work on their sex and love addiction issues. Because if there are those issues that are not addressed, it can cause them to relapse from substance use disorder recovery. That can fuel their shame and depression, which could cause them to do something to hurt themselves. Chrysalis Way is seeking additional CSATs and or love addiction therapists in other states. We currently accept clients in New Jersey, New York, Florida, California, and Nevada. And we accept most major insurances. Shana Rubelow will speak more about their awesome new resource and opportunity shortly. Tomorrow morning, I will send all attendees an evaluation link and CE certificate. A special thank you again to Sage Recovery Villa in the Austin, Texas area for providing the 2 free CEs. Due to the delays caused by COVID-19, Texas social work license renewal is pending. However, CEs should transfer to your board, including out of state, but we ask that you please check with your boards. Before we get started, we will have Tiffany Anschutz, founder and president of Sage Recovery Villa, say a few things about her unique rehab for working professionals in the Austin, Texas area.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I am Tiffany Anschutz. Again, I'm the president and founder of Sage Recovery Villa in Austin, Texas. We are a 15-bed boutique treatment center just right outside of Austin. And one of our specialties is working with business executives and professionals that are needing to do a little bit of work in treatment, but in a clinically effective way. I'm a clinician myself, and when putting a family member through treatment who's a business executive, I found that there was actually really that need for them to be able to kind of work through some of maybe that work addiction and the other areas that they would focus on to try to avoid what was going on. So what we do is we work with the client upon admission and come up with a plan so that their work does not interfere at all with clinical programming. We have them sign a release of information for somebody that can be a liaison between them and their work. And what we do is we tell them, hey, that way if you have a document that needs signed or, something really important, we will make sure that that information gets to you and it gets handled. However, that way you're able to focus on your work And we're also able then to help them work through a feeling of that loss of sense of control and how to enter life back in a healthy way when they get back home. So for many of them, as small business owners or, CEOs of large corporations, the stress doesn't stop right when they get home. So we kind of help them work through that while also addressing the family system and some of the other contributing factors that might be affecting their addiction. So thank you guys for joining us.
All right. Let's see, I think we're going to do the meditation by Joe.
Loren, I'll jump in real quick. I'm just going to introduce everyone on our panel, and then we'll go to Joe. And Joe, we're so looking forward to having your meditation. I think that would be cool. So this webinar is a little bit different than the ones we've done in the past. In the past, we've done webinars with just clinicians, but this one I wanted to shine a little bit light about recovery and how recovery really is not just having a therapist. It's all inclusive with working the 12 steps, with doing yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and a big part of that as well as the spirituality that comes in. So I just want to take a minute to introduce each person on the panelist. We'll go through everyone, and then after that, Joe so graciously offered to do a 5-minute meditation, and then we'll jump right into the discussion. So with that, I'll start with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Rabbi Jacobson, can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do? I think you're muted. Yeah. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be with all my distinguished co-panelists, especially such important topic that affects so many lives and also even generationally. So just briefly, I grew up in the mystical Hasidic tradition. So in an interesting way, it's dealing with growth and healing from a spiritual context, seeing the universe as fundamentally a good place, but we wander off in many different ways and we can betray ourselves or be betrayed. And there are methodologies of how we regain our equilibrium and how we reclaim our lives and our souls, even when we have been traumatized or hurt or become dependent on either behaviors or substances. And obviously in the context of our discussion here, love and sexuality. So I'll be bringing in a perspective from that, let's call it psycho-spiritual perspective on this topic. I'm the author of a book called Toward a Meaningful Life and run the Meaningful Life Center, which offers essentially spiritual self-care, life skills and tools of growth and healing.
Thank you, Rabbi. And yes, I've read your book and I would absolutely recommend it to anyone that's looking to grow spiritually. Rabbi Jacobson, if you have a minute, if you could put a link in the chat, just if anyone wants to buy the book or how to obtain that. We'll move along to Maria Wesley-Pinion, and I apologize if I'm saying your name incorrectly, but Maria, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thank you, Shana. Yes, my name is Maria Wesley-Pinion. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm here in Austin, Texas, just like Tiffany. I am a clinical social worker therapist, and I'm also a CSAT, which stands for Certified Sex Addiction Therapist. So I specialize in working with people struggling with sex addiction, partners of people struggling with sex addiction, and love addiction as well. I also work with a lot of trauma in my work. So I'm here to represent sort of the therapy piece of balance in recovery.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. And now we'll move along to Carver Brown. Carver, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well? Thank you.
Well, it's so nice to be here. Thank you, Shana. And so, yeah, I'm Carver Brown. I come at this as somebody who has lived with the disease of addiction in many forms. My recovery date is June the 14th of 2004. And from that date to today, I haven't had the need to take a drink, take a drug, or marry a stranger, which was a big problem for me. And, you know, if you think crack is expensive, just go around marrying strangers and see how your finances hold up. It's just devastating. But I've been living in this land of recovery. I found recovery through the 12 steps. I've been blessed to be able to work with Dr. Patrick Carnes, and did a 3-year project with him on steps and worked with one of his books. And it's just been a miracle. It's been I'm 64 years old with a 4-year-old. So you just never know about this recovered life and where it'll lead you. So I'm a first-time dad at 64 years old with a 4-year-old. It's an amazing life. I'm an interventionist. I'm a structured family recovery counselor. I'm a grief recovery specialist. I work at a facility called Defining Wellness, a luxury treatment center in Jackson, Mississippi.
Thank you, Carver. And Joe, if you could introduce yourself, Joe Falco. Thank you.
Hi, yes, thank you, Shana. I appreciate it. And thank you. I'm very grateful to all the panelists for allowing me to join you this evening. My name is Joe Falco. I'm a teacher of yoga and meditation and the associated philosophies. I've been a professional the last 5 years and have specialized in teaching meditation in the treatment environment. My wife and I work in the same occupation. She's a yoga therapist, and we co-founded Yoga Veda Center and currently made the move to North Carolina, where I'm at now, to open a retreat center for Panchakarma therapies, which is a branch of Ayurveda, and also meditation and yoga-based retreats, which are very deeply founded and aligned with the 12-step recovery, both my wife and I being in 12-step recovery for a number of years now.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. I'm excited for our panelists because I feel like we have such a great group of people, and I'm excited to ask some questions and see where we go with that. Before we get started, Joe so graciously offered to do a 5-minute meditation. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then once that's done, we can start our discussion. So Joe, if you can, take it away.
Excellent. All right, first and most importantly, I'd ask you to find a comfortable position. So you can sit in your chair or in your seated position or in your bed, wherever you're at watching this webinar. Make yourself physically comfortable and in an upright position if that's okay. And then just move your shoulders around, adjust your clothing, adjust your position until you feel authentically comfortable. And when you're ready, take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Again, breathe in through your nose deeply and out through your mouth. Continue to observe the breath, breathing in and out through your nose, and begin to slow your breath down. We use the breath as an anchoring point in our meditation because the breath is the most effective way to regulate the nervous system. And we often spend a lot of time in fight or flight in the sympathetic nervous system. So here we're going to use the breath, breathing slowly, focusing and consciously relaxing as a way of engaging the parasympathetic or the rest and digest response in the nervous system. As you continue breathing deeply, relax your jaw, relax your neck, relax your shoulders, and relax your abdomen, your belly. Any amount is good. Continue to focus on the breathing. And all we're going to do is focus on one point of the body at a time and consciously relax that point of the body. Beginning with the space of the forehead between the eyebrows. Focus your awareness there and just consciously relax the space between your eyebrows. As you breathe in, breathe into that space. Again, relaxing the space between the eyebrows. Still breathing slowly and rhythmically. Focus on the space of the throat and the neck. Soften and relax the throat and the neck and the back of the neck. Taking the breath further down into the body, become aware of the heart and the lungs. Breathe deeply, feeling the heart, feeling the lungs. And on your exhale, just consciously allow the lungs, allow the heart, allow the chest muscles to relax. Dropping your awareness down into the solar plexus, soften and relax the solar plexus. Then allowing the muscles of the lower abdomen, the hips, the legs to all naturally relax.
Webinar.
We're going to eat. You ready to eat?
Breathe deeply and relax. Continue to focus on the breath. Wherever tension may arise, just consciously relax it, feeling always free to adjust your position. There is no need for rigidity. There is no need for absolute stillness, but we're very gently progressing in that direction. And just for another minute or so here. Praying is speaking to the divine, and meditation is listening to the divine. Listening is a very active process. Allow yourself the intention or the opportunity just for this moment to actively engage in listening to the voice of the divine, which so often speaks to us through other people. Just imagining a final wave of relaxation washing over the body, taking away any remaining tension, any remaining activity. Take a final deep breath in through your nose and out. Very gently bring your palms together in front of you and just rub them until the palms get warm. And then place the warm palms over your eyes. Blink the eyes open and very slowly remove the hands away from the eyes, coming back into the present moment, ready to listen and to absorb. Very good.
Thank you, Joe. As always, you blow me away by how calm you could get to amidst the chaos. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Before I start with the discussion, I just want to talk a little bit about how this came to be. I'm friendly with a gentleman. His name is Ellie Nash, and I helped him in putting together a webinar. And this was maybe in February or March. And the title was Exit Strategy. It was about porn addiction. And I remember the night before we were talking, and we thought maybe 20 or 30 people would show up. And there ended up being a couple of hundred people that came. And afterwards, people reached out to us asking for help, saying, I think I'm an addict, what do I do? And we didn't know where to send them. And that's when I said, we need to figure out a way to help these people. Any clinician or therapist that specializes in sex addiction, they don't have the time to take on any additional clients or a large amount of clients. So that's how we came to be, where we started Chrysalis Way, which is an online virtual sex addiction program. And our goal was just to make available the help for anyone that's struggling with this. And this webinar in the same way is the same, just to answer some questions, to bring awareness to the topics that feel really heavy and that we don't usually talk about. So I'm really excited for the journey that we've been on to get to this point. And with that, I'll start with my first question. And to all the panelists, feel free to jump in if you have something to say, and if not, there's no need. And the first one is about, the title is Balance in Recovery. And my question to each of you is, what does balance in recovery look like to you? And when I think of recovery, I don't think it's the same as abstinence, because abstinence is staying away from that drug that pulls you in, but that's not recovery. Recovery is being happy about it. And you see recovery on someone's face. You see that spark, you see that glow, you see that shine. And that's, to me, recovery is when you look at someone and they're just happy. So I'll turn that question over to you. What does balance in recovery look like to you?
I'll go. Listen, I could just talk for so long about this. I mean, it's mind, body, spirit. But you're right. You know, I remember when I was first in recovery and exploring 12-step recovery, I could see on the faces, you know, certain people who just had that glow about them. And they had, you know, deep committed relationships, and they were gainfully employed in work that was meaningful to them, and they had good home lives. And that was what drew me into recovery. I didn't want just a piece of the promises. I wanted the whole package. So I didn't want to settle, you know, for just you know, being free of one thing. I wanted everything it had to happy, joyous, and free. That's what it means to me.
May I weigh in? I'd like to share a visualization which I believe can help both visualize and experience that celebration, you can say, celebration of recovery, healing, and growth. I think it all begins with the beginning. When none of us are born broken people. None of us are born addicts. We're born beautiful, innocent, pure children. And the way the mystics put it is we're like born in a garden. Think of it like a paradise, a beautiful garden. 9 months that we spend in our mother's womb, completely nurtured and protected, no matter what type of mother that is. And then if it would be a healthy family, that family, the parents and the siblings and our environment would continue nurturing us. That's where we begin. How each of us loses our innocence and ends up wherever we get trapped in different addictions or different distortions to try to relieve our pain or our shame or our disconnect or our trauma, we have to always remember we're never damaged goods. What happens to us happened to us, does not define you. And when you're able to close your eyes and imagine the garden to which you belong to, your God-given gift of the sanctity and the purity and innocence of your life, then no matter what happens, even though it's challenging, the goal is to get back to that place. As you, Shana, put it beautifully, it's not just damage control. It's not just abstinence. It's about actually reclaiming the most beautiful part of yourself. So when you're able to even imagine it, even if you're not there yet, your goal and the end of the journey is reaching that beautiful place before the dissonance, where you can reconnect, find that harmony, find healthy attachment instead of an unhealthy attachment. I think that visualization helps one not just say, okay, I've overcome a challenge, but I actually can embrace a beautiful beginning and a beautiful future.
So well put, beautiful. May I weigh in as well? Ah, man, what a tremendous question. And as both Carver and Rabbi Jacobson expressed, it's from my perspective, like very much our intrinsic nature is joyful. Our intrinsic nature is pure, is pristine, and there's a part of us that never gets touched by any of our life experiences. And having the opportunity to take a spiritual perspective to the environment of treatment, which for many people is like the most difficult period of the unmanageability of disease in the many forms that it takes, the question kind of arose naturally, like, what is the purpose? What is the purpose? Well, for me, the question was, what is the spiritual purpose of such a devastating disease? And what I've understood is that the disease has the power to bring enough pain, enough suffering, enough chaos and calamity for us to become willing. And the people who I've seen who that shift happens, they throw their hands up and they're like, whatever you tell me I got to do, I'll do it. I can't do it the way that I've wanted to. And that people like us, it takes a lot to convince us. Things have to get bad enough. And that's, bad enough was a tremendous pain and struggle until recovery came. And recovery was that pivoting point, and it was defined by my willingness. And that's just speaking for myself. But so many people I've seen in recovery, and so many people who I've learned from and been taught by in recovery, willingness seems to be that cornerstone, and that pivot when it happens, like we get ourselves back. We get that pristine part of ourselves. We get the joyful part of ourselves back. We get the part of ourselves who can live a fulfilling life and maybe isn't always afraid for the other shoe to drop. And this is so profound. And this question of balance and the difference between abstinence and recovery, abstinence is like the price of entry for me. Recovery is this infinitely deep path that can take me to the highest states of well-being, of peace of mind, and financial health and familial health. The family dynamic is such a part of my recovery personally and my 12-step journey. So many aspects of my life can be healed, and it's the only thing that was ever truly asked of me was willingness. And that willingness is like the thing that can take us in so deep into recovery. So what a beautiful question.
I would love to jump in on that note. That was beautiful. And I'll just kind of tag team on that, because I think from a therapy perspective, when I speak to clients and I talk to them about recovery, you're not going to get recovered just going to therapy. And if you don't have that, I see individuals all the time that come in, but that willingness and almost a humility that, I'm at the end of my rope. I just can't live my life in this way anymore. And it becomes such a gorgeous, beautiful thing. Once they get, years past it, they can look back on it and see it as a beautiful pivot in their life. And it's such an honor to get to be there with them. But when I also think of recovery, I also think of like, in sex addiction recovery, we talk about these, sex and love addiction recovery, we talk about these circles, and we always talk about this outer circle being the circle that I tell my clients I want them to be sort of living in this outer circle, not just focusing on what they don't want to do, meaning not just the abstinence, but let's dream. Let's think about what fun do you want in your life? We talk about that a lot, like and like you said, like family, what's going on with your family relationships, not just your partner, but your relationship with your kids, and how do the connections and intimacies look in your life with your friends, and are you able to be connected and intimate with people? And usually they're not, and that's a new thing for them. And it's this broadening thing that begins to be focused not on just abstaining from the actions, but finding this whole new perspective on what life can be. So.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was so enlightening. And Maria, I love the fact that you touched on the fun part, because that's something that was definitely a big part for me. Someone once told me, do something every day for your recovery. And what I realized is it's not so much about, doing the hard stuff. It's find something fun every day, because when you're having fun, you're enjoying life, and life is just better. So I love that you brought up the fun part, because that's really what life is about. Life is supposed to be enjoyable. And sometimes we get a little lost in that, and we miss the point. Another question that I have for all of you is, how does sex and love addiction create imbalances? And in what area do you see that it affects someone's life? So I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts on that, if you can.
Oh, I'll give it a shot. It just, I mean, how does it create imbalance? It just shatters you, inside. I mean, you're broken and splintered in so many pieces. It's the definition of being lost, and lost in a crowd of people, because it was like the one most important thing to me that I longed for in my life was a deeply committed, authentic sexual relationship. And I everything I did was the antithesis of that. It drove me completely away. So my heart's desire was pulled away from me, which was just the definition of imbalance. I was lost, and it wasn't until I, as was described so well by Joe, that I hit that point of surrender, and I had to, and it was pain. It was pain that drove me into it, and then the fear of changing had to be less than the pain of staying where I was. And then once I gave myself over and to try those simple things that they ask us to do, and then little by slowly, and it was a long process, very long process. That first year is the most tenuous, and but I was determined, and I just wasn't willing to settle for less than everything that recovery had to offer. And as we said earlier, I could see it in the face of my sponsor. I could see it in the lives of the other people who were working the program that I was working. And then it became about being willing to change and modify. So it was, about gaining some exercise in my life and some meditation. And it was about, finding that spiritual path. It was about finding a passion in my work where I really didn't have to show up at work anymore. I mean, it wasn't work anymore. It was a passion. It was something that I just enjoyed doing. So it was all of that became that outer circle that Maria described. And I started living in that outer circle. And that became the balance of life.
Well, I wanted to, again, piggyback on what Carver was saying about we see, I think in sex and love addiction, what we often see, especially as the forefront, is the imbalance in relationship. With people will come in and say, my partner never has sex with me, or my partner has sex with everybody else, or whatever. And it's so focused on relationships. And when you can, one thing that's interesting that I often do with my clients at the very beginning of seeing them is give them a 90-day abstinence assignment. So 90 days, even if they're married, they go 90 days with no sex, no self-sex, no anything like that. And usually their jaw drops. They look at me like, nobody ever does that. So, but then it's always fascinating to be about 30 days in, they're learning from that experience, and they're learning about relationships and intimacy and connection and about themselves. And it creates this focus off the sex and love I'm getting or not getting, and on that outer circle that we keep kind of talking about, right? And it's more this like this passion that begins to sort of bud like a bud of a flower, right? And this like, I want to know what this might be about kind of begins to happen. And it's neat to watch. So.
My turn, or is anyone else on the panel going to speak? So let me share this. Beautifully stated. Thank you. I'll try to take it to another level. Since I'm using the spiritual model, spiritual psychological model, you know, no one has ever seen the soul. No one has ever seen the human psyche. We only experience it through its effects on us, positive or negative. So to be able to map out, perhaps, the steps from how we begin healthy, pure lives, as I mentioned before, as children, and then how we wander off and how we return, I think can help understand the dynamics in the question you asked about what effect it has on us, the addiction, love, and sex addiction. So I'd like to just state it in 5 steps briefly. We all begin with a type of seamlessness. You know, you look at little children, they play, they're not self-conscious, they're not inhibited, unless extenuating circumstances, and they just have a certain sense of seamlessness, of adventure, without fears, without insecurities. So you can say it all begins with a type of unified harmony. Then something breaks. It can be a small thing, it can be a very serious trauma. Something breaks the balance. And of course, then the child or the adult will begin to find ways to fix that break. But before the break, the way the mystics put it, there's a certain concealment, a state of concealment where your true inner self becomes concealed, either because it was invalidated or abused or absentee, lack of love and nurturing, like a flower that is not receiving its water, so it withers. So it says the harmony, then comes a concealment, then comes a break, where things really break in the sense where we give up, we try to replace the void with something else. And that, of course, is the possibility of theirs. You can hit really rock bottom, everyone in their own particular way. And then the narrative continues, however. The narrative continues, you begin to repair this break. The word splintered was used, shattered. These are actually words in the Kabbalistic literature talk about the shattering of the containers, the splintering, the fragmentation. And then there's the repair, where you begin to put pieces back together. And again, many people go through it in different ways. It's a long process, it's not overnight. But what I want to lead to is step 5. Step 5 is where you discover deeper resources that you would not have had, even that child in the harmony state did not have that, because now when you begin to repair, you need to dig deeper and find inner strengths. So if you could see your life, no matter where you are, and say, okay, which chapter of your life are you in now? Are you in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? It helps, first of all, continue the journey and not get stuck. But also you could see the consequence of an addiction, because an addiction essentially is feeding the fragmentation, trying to find a remedy, a short-term remedy to relieve the pain, to numb, to fill the void of healthy attachments through unhealthy attachments. And then instead of you controlling what you love, the things you love, the objects of your desires, the objects of your addictions become controlling of you. So I think when you put it in that context, it can help understand the process, as well as the great pain and the challenge of that dissonance that comes through splintering and fragmentation.
Wow. Yes. Powerful. It's amazing to see some consistent and universal truths emerging.
Yeah.
And the word splinter and the word break and the word shatter, the word yoga, which is from one of the most ancient books on spirituality in the world, the word yoga means union. It means to unite. And the scriptures of yoga often are called sutras. and sutra is where the English word suture, or like a thread that you use to stitch something up, comes from. It's these like pieces that help us put ourselves back together. And as I'm listening, I'm reminded that my disease is one of perspective. Anything, it could be anything. It could be vegetables, it could be intimate relationships, it could be big things, it could be small things. Anything when it's this close to my face is completely overwhelming. When I'm in it and I can't see past it, it's completely overwhelming. There's no escape. And all I've really needed in my recovery, especially in those early phases when it's super difficult, is that tap on the shoulder. Just to have someone say, take a step back. And then as soon as I see it, I go, oh, I know how to deal with that. Or it becomes at least a little more clear, you know. But there have been so many times where, you know, I'm faced so intimately with this insurmountable obstacle. And it took someone in recovery to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, take a step back. You can walk around this insurmountable obstacle. You don't have to go over it. You can go around it. There's a bunch of different ways that you could handle this. And that imbalance, man, how does it bring imbalance? It distorts my perspective until my life is totally beyond my control. It fixates all of my energy, all of my awareness, it makes me obsess over things I don't have any control or power over. It takes all the focus away from where it needs to be, which is here, which is where it should be. The things I do have control over, the things I do have power and divinely given power over, which is inside, which is me, you know, getting back to that. So cool.
Thank you, everyone, for such wonderful words of wisdom. Joe, I love how you brought up the word yoga is unity. That's just, it's a big part of recovery, I would have to say, is not being alone and being able to reach out to others that are struggling as well. I once heard this great analogy of a broom. When you turn it upside down and you pull the bristles out one by one, they come right out. But when you grab it in your hand and you pull a whole fistful out, they don't come because they're stronger together. And I think that's a big part, is that together we're stronger. So I love that you brought that up. Thank you. Another question that I have that I feel like it comes up often is about spirituality. And I know there's like a big toss up of what's the difference between spirituality and religion, but a question that I want to know is, what does spiritual balance have to do with recovery? And Rabbi Jacobson, I remember once we were on a call and you said to me, the same God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. And that hit so deep, because I was like, wow, you know, and to hear a rabbi say that meant something to me. So if anyone wants to jump in about the spiritual aspect and how that's intertwined with recovery, I would love that.
Since you mentioned my name, maybe I'll begin. First of all, I want to say something about spirituality and religion. I don't know if you know this, but statistics show that around 92 to 95% of Americans, and I assume it's the whole Western world, that has some form of spirituality in their lives, some form of God, soul, and only 40-some% that identify with some religion. Now that's a serious discrepancy. And that discrepancy is due to the fact that religion is associated far more with words like this: ritual, commitment, community, prayer, house of worship. Those are the good words. The negative ones are fear, punitiveness, rage, judgmentalism, condescension, you know, every Woody Allen stereotype out there, which unfortunately many stereotypes have reason why they're stereotypes. So in many ways, religion has become rendered into a form of, to put it quite bluntly, a bureaucracy that can be somewhat, to some extent, perhaps useful, but it also can be very unhealthy. You have power, fundraising and money becomes more important than the faith. And from my perspective, religion was always meant to be hand in hand with spirituality. Ritual together with the SPI before the word spiritual, which means more people identify music, love, travel, art with transcendence and spirituality than they do religion. Some will even say the more religious, the less spiritual. The more spiritual, the less religious, which is sad because religion is meant to be essentially the mechanics of spirituality. Just like you learn how to play notes on a piano or on a violin, the technical part is playing the notes. The music is the product. So spirituality is the music, and the rituals, whatever religion it may be, are meant to be pressing those buttons. But what happens if you press the buttons and it just becomes dogma? It just becomes hollow, mechanical religion. So that is why, exactly what I said to you, and I say this to myself, it's actually a line from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, was an 18th century great Hasidic mystic and master. He said to a self-proclaimed atheist, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. Because what do you mean by the word God? Most of us have very juvenile and nursery school visions and interpretations of God. And I think it needs a complete revamping and reclaiming the spirit and the soul of it all. So in the context of healing, I can tell you from my own experience, very often religion actually becomes part of the problem, because religion could also be an addiction, and religion can definitely be a cover-up where you hide behind your religion and you never go heal. Because you say, 1 second, I'm being a faithful person, I'm following the rituals, I'm praying, and God will take care of everything. It doesn't work that way. So spirituality, to me, is, we know what psychology means? Psychology is the study of the soul. That's its word. Logi is study, and psych is from the word soul. So it was always known that the soul went hand in hand with any type of, let's call it, religious rituals. Unfortunately, many people were hurt by religion, were even abused in the name of religion. So often the only way for them to grow and heal is in a way to discard an unhealthy, dysfunctional religion, and then they can reclaim their souls and in effect reclaim a God that they never knew in the first place. So that would be my the context of it, and I hope it wasn't too sacrilegious for some, but I really feel very passionate about this.
Wow. Carver, you want to go?
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh man, I love this subject. I love this subject so much. Having studied spirituality in multiple traditions, and some being very deeply rooted in that sort of tradition, and the more heavy on the ritualistic side, I've come to understand that the context of the word religion has changed dramatically throughout the last several thousand years, in the sense that it didn't really, for a very long time, it didn't really denominate a set of beliefs that were intended to be subscribed to. But religion was rather a set of things you did. It was a practice. It was what you did in life in order to achieve very specific things. And the rituals surrounding it are just really symbolic and beautiful elaborations on the same thing. So religion is something that is sort of able to stand on its own and has a tradition and it has a history and it has lineages and it has dogma even. All of that exists there. Where in spirituality, there's sort of an undeniability to it. Spirituality, there's sort of a spiritual nature to reality, in that when we recognize the simple fact that we're not the final authority, we recognize immediately that there is so much beyond our comprehension. And the moment we recognize there's so much beyond our comprehension, the world becomes a great mystery, And if the world is a great mystery, we must, to some degree, acknowledge that we're on a journey in searching and figuring it out. And man, spirituality is just a look at nature, an ability to look around and recognize that there is so much mystery and so much beauty and so much life, and that there is some source of life. and that we have it and it's here and we have some kind of relationship to it. And then as all that relates to recovery, in my experiences, the disease is incredibly, incredibly spiritual. It's no coincidence that in the first forms of recovery in AA in particular, people were turning to spirits. It's a spiritual malady, it's a spiritual disease. And the only solution for a spiritual disease is a spiritual solution. So it evolved naturally from this. It doesn't matter if you're an atheist. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in anything. Don't believe in anything. Believe in what you've experienced. Believe in what you experience. But maybe if you try these things, they will produce a certain effect. And that's the faith that's required. Try these things. Try a different way, and perhaps it'll produce a different result. And maybe that evolves over time into more of an elaborate understanding of how little we know. And that's what becomes a religion, in my experience. Yeah.
That's beautiful, Joe. And thank you, Rabbi Jacobson, because I was following your talk and it just paralleled my own personal journey, because I grew up, I'm from the South, you can tell by the way I talk. And so if there's a Bible Belt, Mississippi's the buckle. And so we grew up in the church, and we went to church, you know, when the doors were opened. And so I grew up, you know, in this, and so religion came for me in my adult life. It became a kind of a performance theology. I was Sunday school director of 1,000 Family Church. I had attended stadium crusades and been on medical mission trips, but I was lost because I hadn't really come to the true essence of who I was. And something else that was said earlier, and my family of origin, I had never really explored, you know, the trauma that I had been through and what it was like growing up in an alcoholic home. And so it was until I became acquainted with who my real inner self was, I continued to be lost. And then in early recovery, I just didn't feel worthy that I could go back to a religious practice. I was still so filled with shame from the behaviors that I had been exhibiting. But then over time, as recovery settled in, and I started to turn my attention to the service of other people, and started realizing that it wasn't just about me, that I could find a life in service of humanity. And then it all sort of made sense. And I came to the end to realize that I could follow a religious practice, and that actually recovery and the religious practice became the same thing. They blended together beautifully. I wasn't in conflict at all. I was just addicted. And what I needed in my life was recovery and come back to my true self. So thank you both for pointing that out and reminded me of the journey. Thank you.
I'm going to let all of you guys kind of hold the title on that one. But one thing that came to my mind was how much a client will the idea in the 12 steps of getting beyond yourself and giving over to a higher power, and how for a lot of people, it's that first time they have ever truly been on that journey of giving all the unmanageability to a higher power, and how important that is. And I too, Carver, being from Texas, you know, we have so much doctrine and legalism in the Christianity, and that I get a lot of clients who grow in that sense, and being able to see it doesn't have to be about all this legalism and this rules and everything. And I think that's such an important part of the journey of becoming free in recovery, you know. So that's something I think is such a beautiful part of a really solid recovery.
Thank you, everyone. This is definitely something that I knew this webinar would be great, but I don't think I realized how great. So I'm really grateful for all of you for such great information, and just your view on it. It's also really interesting how aligned each of you are with each other. So I guess that's just recovery, is we're all in this together. Another question that I would like to bring up are, what components of healthy recovery are necessary to maintain? And if I had to, if for myself, whenever anyone calls me that's struggling, my first thing that I always want to tell them is, be gentle with yourself. Because to me, that's the basis of everything. Is, you know, when a person comes from a place of love instead of a place of self-hate, it changes the dynamics. And I once heard a quote that just that said, a man can stand for anything as long as he can stand for himself. And it's all about the love. It's all about, you know, we make mistakes, but that doesn't define us. So I'd love to hear if anyone wants to jump in a little bit about that. Just the components of healthy recovery.
Yes, those words, be gentle with yourself. Thank you, Shana. I've studied with many different teachers in my life, and several of them highly accomplished spiritual teachers, highly enlightened people. One of which is an avatar, truly, like a highly enlightened master, Dr. Vasant Lad of the Ayurvedic Institute, who is the world's foremost teacher in Ayurveda. And of all the amazing wisdom that these men and women have said directly to me, the thing that impacted me and changed me the most was said to my sponsor in Al-Anon, actually. He said, be gentle with yourself. What? My entire understanding of how to be a human being shifted at that moment. Be gentle with yourself meant I am enough, I have enough, I do enough. It meant contentment. It meant everything is exactly as it's supposed to be right now. And everything takes time. Time takes time. And to enjoy my part in the process that I get to have. And it was amazing because a lot of my sickness in my thinking was really deeply tied into my ambitions and really like wanting to change things, and even sometimes for the better. So it was like, could a desire to be better and do better coexist with contentment? And the realization that came about with those words, be gentle with yourself, was not only is it possible for ambition, for life, really wanting the world and life to be better, to exist with contentment, but that they are completely and utterly intrinsic to each other. Because if I live my life in a way where I don't have fulfillment and contentment now as a choice, as a practice, not as a set of circumstances, but as a decision, then I'll never have it. There's no set of circumstances that can bring about peace for me. I tried. I tried lots and lots of different sets of circumstances, and none of them brought peace. None of them brought lasting peace and fulfillment. But that be gentle with yourself was permission to have it now. To have it now, and not have to wait until I'm better, until I finish the 12 steps, until I do this, until I do that. There were no circumstances that could keep me away from God, that could keep me away from truth, that could keep me away from peace. So amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Joe. You know, my sponsor reminded me quite often, gently does it. You know, the path is gentle. In Pat Carnes's book, it's a gentle path, through the 12 steps. And so, I had to be reminded, over and over, because in early recovery, I was very hard on myself, and I was trying so hard, but I came to realize that I really couldn't be gentle with other people until I could learn to be gentle with myself. And it was honestly so disarming in the rooms of recovery, because I can just tell you that I couldn't tell you much of anything in the early days of what people said to me that was so impactful, but I can describe to you in detail how they treated me and how gentle they were and how loving they were. They only, the only requirement was that I show up, and they were happy and glad that I was there, whether I contributed or not. And for the longest time, I couldn't contribute. I have to tell you, I just, I was so powerfully addicted. I could only hear about every third word. And the people were very, they were so happy. It was very disarming. I just, and they held hands, and I was like, where's the sanitizer? And, they prayed, together. And I just thought, what is this organization? They passed a basket and threw dollar bills in. And I thought, this is no way to grow an organization. I went to my first meeting, and I walked up. They had said to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I walked up to the chairperson, handed him my American Express card, and said, give me 90 days worth. And he looked at me and said, keep coming back. I didn't know what they were talking about, but I remember how they treated me. They treated me gently, and it was overpowering to me. I'll never forget. Thank you for the reminder, Joe.
Oh, Carvey, you had me almost laughing out loud. I just wanted to, I think the question was, what are the components of healthy recovery? And I couldn't agree more that if a client is not, learning empathy with themselves, they can't really truly give it. And so often I work with a married couple, and then so it's so hard for them to give it to their partner or their children if they haven't learned how to give it to themselves. But what I wanted to kind of throw in there was the whole family of origin, working on family of origin components of any trauma that might have happened is, in my opinion, for sex and love addiction, so important, because I feel like if someone doesn't address that piece of it, they're probably going to be at relapse risk anyway. So, and that's kind of a long road. So depending on what you've gone through, but I think that's such a big part of healthy recovery.
Well, beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. Just the very word, the sound of the word gentleness and tenderness is itself quite soothing. So it elicits a few thoughts I'd like to just throw into the equation here. I would even put it this way. I think since we're talking about addiction, love and sex addiction in another way is a way of mistreating yourself. It's actually being very harsh with yourself. And though it does create temporary relief, but the fact of the matter is you're not being kind to yourself. The fact that you become dependent on it, the obsessions involved, the shame involved. So being gentle with yourself isn't just a good tool. It actually is a counterforce to unhealthy love, because unhealthy love is not gentle. Unhealthy love is aggressive, is harsh, is judgmental even. And healthy love and healthy intimacy is being gentle with yourself and with others. Brings to mind one of a great line that I always use from one of the middle-aged scholars. His name was the Rabbeinu Tam. He says, words from the heart enter the heart. Words that come from your mind or from your mouth go in one ear and often out the other. Words from the heart enter the heart. Or another way, I'm not sure who coined this line, but it's also a great one, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The power of empathy, of love, of gentleness cannot be overstated. It is essentially what makes us tick. Even think of it in terms of purely the heartbeat, our breathing. A healthy heartbeat is pulsating. Pulsating energy is very soothing and very gentle. It's a flow. If there's any obstacle or impediment, it creates a block. I remember someone coming to see me, it was years ago, and you could see his body language. He was so coiled up within himself. And he told me, I've never felt love. I've always been picked on. I was bullied. And you could tell his body was like one. But so I said to him, I didn't have what to say to him. So I said to him, why don't you stand up for a moment? He stood up and I stood up. I went over to him, unexpected, and I grabbed him, in a gentle way, and I hugged him. He was like, he recoiled. He became like a slab of concrete. He had so many knots. And I realized right there, gentleness, he hadn't experienced in years.
What's up? Good, how are you today?
And just that gentle hug was so antithetical to his experiences. But that's what it is. How do we feel when we go into water? You go swimming, you go underwater for a moment, you float. There's something about being submerged in a reality that's greater than you are that is soothing, it's nurturing. So I think it cannot, as I said before, it cannot be overstated, the importance of it. Firstly, gentle to yourself and gentle to others. It's a fundamental component to who we are. We are fundamentally gentle and tender creatures that are often forced to put on all different layers of armor and defensive mechanisms, and often even behavior that we don't even enjoy, just to protect ourselves because we feel so vulnerable. Like they say, the porcupine has the sharpest needles because it has the softest underbelly. So it's creating all kinds of defense to protect itself. So when you're able to enter the gentle zone, the tender zone, there's nothing more refreshing. It resonates, and it's like you feel you belong. And then this world that we live in now, this hostile world, and so often gentleness and the tenderness and soulfulness, which are all really synonymous, are more necessary than ever, and definitely in the context of healing and recovery.
Thank you all. I absolutely love the focus on being gentle and being nice, because there's so much negativity around addiction and people beat themselves up so much. There's so much guilt and shame, and it's unnecessary. I once heard shame is for who you are, guilt is for what you've done. And there's never a reason for shame, because we're all beautiful humans. I have some more great questions. I just want to take a minute to stop. I'm going to have Loren introduce Ken Seeley, and I'd love to have him join in a little bit.
Hi, everybody. It's Loren again. I just wanted to quickly introduce Ken Seeley. It's a treat to have him here tonight. Ken is a part of Intervention 911 and owner of Ken Seeley Rehab and Mental Wellness by Ken Seeley in Palm Springs, California. So let's welcome Ken.
Hi, Ken.
Thank you, Loren.
You're
Nice
welcome.
to see all of you. How you doing?
Hey.
How you doing? So
Hey,
yeah,
Ken.
thank you so much for having me. I love this topic. I mean, it's not only something that we like to treat and help people with, and like the rabbi was saying, it's about that compassion, that love, going into it with nurture instead of being punitive around it. It's funny that we're having this today, because today I did a trauma egg at our facility, and one of the guys that was presenting the trauma egg, he suffers from sex addiction with porn. And then 5 years ago, it went to alcohol. And so the porn wasn't working anymore, and because he was tired of hiding it from his wife and figuring that all out. So he went to alcohol. And now he was numb, where he didn't need to do porn because he was, drunk. So his primary addiction was porn. And when you unravel it, and you unravel the trauma, when we did the trauma egg, he was sexually abused as a child, and at 6 years old. And when he told his parents, they kind of brushed it off, and he felt invisible, and he felt, like he was the bad person for bringing it up. And then he started going into all these negative feelings about himself and sex and all of this stuff. Like he said, you know, the abuser would lick his ear and he would say, you know, I don't even like having sex with my wife and touching my ear because it brings back that PTSD. And now he's in treatment for alcoholism. But really, I wanted to point out, you know, through the trauma process, what was the original thing that happened? And it was just not being heard as that little boy. And I said, what does the pornography do for you? And he goes, it's like wrapping a warm blanket around me. I feel safe. And then earlier on, he said with the alcohol, it was like drinking the alcohol, he felt invincible, like nothing was wrong, like the warm blanket again. And really all it was is that poor little boy never got the opportunity to share, and then getting bullied as a little kid because, you know, with those low self-esteems, you're the easy target. So he went right into being bullied as a little boy. You know, me personally, I suffer from sex addiction also. And, you know, and it was the same thing, the bullying constantly and not feeling worthy. And then if I could only catch that one, then I'm worthy. Now I'm worthy because I was able to get that one to have sex with me. And it built my self-esteem, which was all false and it didn't work. But that's the mentality. That's what we're dealing with when we have these clients that are going through this. It's just really low self-esteem that feels like they need to feel loved somehow. And having the expression of sex or porn or whatever the case may be, it just makes you feel like that warm blanket. So my homework assignment to him was, I want you to go get a blanket. And anytime you feel like you want to have a drink or you want to watch porn, I want you to grab the warm blanket and say, the little boy doesn't need that today. You have your blanket. So just giving you some other tools instead of using what we normally gravitate towards, and finding something that is going to shift within us to change. Like my doctor, what he told me was, every time you feel like you want to go out and have sex, then what I want you to do is, that's a knock on the door from God. And God is telling you it's time to meditate. And so anytime I felt like, oh, let me get online on those apps. You know, back in the day when I was in my addiction, it was AOL. I don't know if anybody knows AOL. It was the AOL chat rooms. And I would jump on the chat rooms. But once my mind went there, like, again, immediate, you know, for the first 15 years of my recovery, I was in full-blown sex addiction. You know, and I don't know, I didn't understand why I bought a gun on the internet with, you know, 10 years sober, wanting to commit suicide, because I was in another addiction, full-blown another addiction. If I only had that person to fulfill the void within here, I would feel complete. So I really love this topic. I really, really appreciate you having this, you know, workshop where people could, you know, really understand that. I would say a lot of the people that we treat, a lot of the people, you know, start off, you know, he talked about masturbation, you know, as a young little boy and the first time he ejaculated. And, you know, he talked all about that in his trauma egg this morning, that feeling, that rush made him feel worthy. And he was just craving that and craving that. And that's the disease. That's the disease, is because that little boy, that's the sickness, is that little boy just doesn't feel validated or loved. So there was a lot of other things that we did after the trauma egg where, you know, we sat with him and we said, you know, tell me, you know, when the situation happened, what did you need your dad to say? What did you need your dad to say when you were being abused and you bought him that letter and told him? And he's bawling and saying, I love you. I'm here for you. Nobody's ever going to hurt you again. And then I said, well, you have a little boy that is around the same age that you were molested by, at the same age you were molested at. I said, now put your little boy there put your little boy in that chair right across from you. We have this big trauma teddy, we call him, a gigantic 6-foot teddy bear. And I said, look at that little boy, see your son in there. And what would you tell him if he was molested? And he just started bawling. I love you. No one will ever hurt you. I'm here for you. This will never happen again. I'm sorry it happened. I am always going to be here for you. And all the things that I said, imagine if you heard those things, how your life may have turned out differently. I mean, it's that little bit of a shift. So I just love that you guys are all talking about this, because we got to air it out. A lot of people are suffering from it. A lot of people, it's primary. It's before the drugs and alcohol. It's something that makes us feel good before we even know what drugs and alcohol are. And, and we abuse it. So thank you everyone for being here today. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share them with all you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Beautifully said.
And do you want to say real quickly in a couple of words what the trauma egg is? I see a few people are asking what that is.
Oh, absolutely. So a trauma egg is, I did my own trauma egg with Judy Crane years ago, and she trained me how to, to work with clients on them. I didn't realize as I was going to train on how to do them for my clients, they make you do your own. So that was the rough part, because it's a lot of crying and it's a lot of, experiencing the trauma that happened. So you take your earliest trauma that you remember. So like, I remember when I was 2 years old, my sister being born, and I was like, what is she doing, here? I was like, I'm happy without her. And, and so at 2 years old, that was a form of a trauma. And then, at 4 years old, I would get bullied in school. From 4 to 14, every day, it was like a war zone walking out there. So what I did from 2 years old to 14 years old, I put every traumatic experience that happened to me in school. And I talked about each one of them, and you draw pictures. Because when you draw pictures, you draw a picture like a circle, like an egg, or a rectangle like an egg. And then you draw these little like circular corners in the egg, and you draw pictures of each trauma. And the reason why you draw the pictures, it uses the opposite side of the brain. So you draw the pictures and you get into the feeling of what that experience was like at that time. And you're drawing the pictures of them. And then you draw the next picture and the next picture. And when I was, because I was bullied all the time, the feeling of not being picked on, when you're on a base or in gym and everybody's lined up and they're picking the people for their team. And I'm the only one that's not being picked until the last one every single time. My hands are sweating, my head is sweating. I'm scared to death that, I'm going to be picked on again because nobody wants me. So I go through that trauma. I go through, my dad not being there for me, when I didn't feel like he was there the way I wanted him to be there. So all these little traumas I call it the addictive hustle. So I take that, and what I do is I create a pattern to protect that little boy. The 4-year-old creates a pattern, and I took that pattern until I was 40 years old. From 4 to 40, I had a pattern that I did, and it worked for me as a 4-year-old to be invisible, to not be heard, to not let people see me. So the reason of the trauma egg is you want to unravel all the different traumas and see the pattern and how that pattern doesn't work for you. Because then when I become invisible, I become really angry because nobody hears or sees me. So I accomplished my goal on being invisible, but now I have anger issues because why can't anybody see me? Why am I invisible? Why am I not connecting with other human beings? And then I get a temper. So that creates this roller coaster ride. And once you realize that it's because that little 4-year-old wasn't protected. Now you're able to regulate the anger because you realize the adult isn't that 4-year-old anymore and doesn't have to be invisible and doesn't have to react, because the only way that 14-year-old knew how to respond to being invisible was to be angry. You know, tell my parents I hate them. Tell them that they're no good. You know, just rage, 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 because the 14-year-old is just filled up with it. So when you do the trauma egg, you're able to see the whole unraveling of all the traumas, and you're able to see where it came from and have a new awareness on what are you going to do in the future. When am I going to get explosive? Because that's the 4-year-old and 14-year-old's response. Or am I going to digest it and take a deep breath and not react to the situation, but respond to the situation? So that's the purpose of a trauma egg.
Thank you so much, Ken. I appreciate that. That was so enlightening and really interesting to hear. Another question that I guess flows in the same vein. Someone actually sent me this question: how does a couple recover physical intimacy after a marriage that's been broken and traumatized because of sex and love addiction? And I'm gonna, that's the question, but the question that I'm gonna ask you is similar to that, is how is sex addiction different than all other addictions, and how to work with that? So if anyone would like to jump in, I'd appreciate that.
I'll jump in on that. How is sex addiction different? It's a complex answer. It's more of an intimacy-based disorder. And like Rabbi Jacobson, I think, was saying, or maybe Ken was saying, it occurs, it's sort of a primary addiction. It usually occurs when, I like to tell my clients, you know, when we're a little child, we don't have access to substances. We have access to food, and we have access to our genitals and other things like that can create dopamine and serotonin. And so some people will create that, like he said, like the blanket, the warm blanket, to deal with whatever trauma. Sometimes the trauma is not necessarily abuse. Sometimes it's neglect. I've kind of I don't know if I coined it or I heard it somewhere, but I talk with my clients about this thing I call benign neglect, which is, you know, you were fed, you were clothed, you were driven to school, driven to football, but not, your parents didn't connect with you. And so you really didn't learn empathy and intimacy as a child. And you grow up with a lot of deficit. I see a lot of male clients that they're kind of getting that from females, whether it be relationships or sex workers, whatever, or pornography. So, and we also see a lot of overlap with sex addiction with other addictions, with alcohol, with drugs, with work addiction. That's pretty common. So it's kind of a complex answer to throw out there, but I really like to explain to people, you know, I get the question when I'm at a dinner party, you know, what kind of therapist are you? And when I say sex addiction, everybody says, oh, you're a sex therapist. No, I'm a sex addiction therapist. You know, and I have to kind of explain to people the complexity of what we in the field kind of think of as intimacy disorder piece of sex addiction and love addiction. So I think of it as a lot more of an intimacy-based issue. And I think, did you say the question, Shana, about the question I was going to jump in about how does a couple get their sex life and their sexuality back? That is a gigantic topic. I work with couples on that very, you know, a lot. And that's, I could go on and on about that a lot. I work a lot with the one struggling with addiction, whether it's a female or a male, on empathy, because a lot of time they're just not functioning from a basis of that. Either they're love avoidant and they're out here having sex outside of the marriage, or they're inside of the marriage. I see a lot of clients that are sex addicted on their wife, for example, like sort of what I call consuming their wife, right? Like you would consume porn or something. And there's a lot of tension. And I even saw a question about partner violence on the questions, because sometimes that can come up when you've got that kind of abusive dynamic going on between the male and the female about sexuality, and somebody's refusing and the other person is saying, you know, you don't have a right to refuse, we're married, and, you know, concepts like that that get thrown around. So that's a very big topic, but there's a place called the Center for Healthy Sex. I use a lot of they're out in LA, and they have a lot of resources for ways. Alex Katahakis is the girl who runs that center, and she has a lot of resources for helping couples get back to really healthy intimacy once they're in recovery.
Let me weigh in here. I'll cite the biblical description or the biblical definition of intimacy, otherwise known as sexuality, is interesting, is to know your partner. The word knowledge is used. Knowledge is a form of healthy intimacy. And answering both questions, intimacy is actually the deepest way you're experiencing yourself and you experience another. The reason it releases dopamine, the reason that it brings such pleasure and relief, whether it's healthy or unhealthy forms of sexual expression, is because it reaches, let's call it the innermost wiring of our souls. It's one soul seeking to connect and attach to another. So in the healthy context is the most beautiful thing possible. And therefore it creates so much about the harmony of life. It even has the power to give birth to life and so on. In the unhealthy version is where it's misplaced. And when it's misplaced, you're not just misplacing like somebody scratched your finger. If the intimate sexual identity of a person is involved in things that are not constructive, that are destructive, you're actually like going into the very heart and soul of who you are. And someone imagines scratching your heart. That's far, far different than a surface or superficial experience, which is one of the reasons that sexual abuse is so profound and sexual addiction is so different than many other addictions, even though there's obviously many commonalities. And as far as the second half of it is, look, there's always the symptoms and there's the cause. When a couple have drifted apart, or there've been some type of infidelity, or some type of trust betrayed, and so on. So there is the actual trust issues in the relationship, and then there's the symptoms of it. So you have to really get to the heart and soul of the relationship. If two people indeed can love each other and can revisit that point of love, then it's a slow process of healing from within, from inside out, that ultimately can then be expressed in an intimate way. But you can't expect after a betrayal or after any type of violation that people are just going to say, oh yeah, let's be intimate again. You know, and we're talking not on a physical level alone, not just technical. We're talking about your emotions are there, you really feel. So I look at it that I think the challenge of sexuality and intimacy is really goes both ways. It's really reclaiming the real you, reclaiming the real vulnerable, beautiful you that can totally trust and can totally connect and know another to the point you become, as in the words of the Bible, one flesh. Not two entities, but become one, and one with God, with the divine itself.
Can I jump in and just, I love what you said, Rabbi Jacobson, about, you know, knowing one another and it being the most intimate, deep part of ourselves, and then what we can share with another human being. And I just want to reiterate what he said about it being when someone's been betrayed in sex addiction, it's a slow healing process. Those struggling with sex addiction and then other kinds of therapists that don't specialize in this often want it to be, oh, you should just get back to having sex, you know, and it's just, the trust has been so betrayed that if the couple can reunite and become intimate again, the couples I see that do it well, the one who was addicted learns how to become very patient and very empathetic to the betrayal and the pain to the betrayed partner.
You know, what's interesting, I love that. And what's interesting, you know, I spent 10 years working with Pat Carnes, and so worked with clients and developed an alumni program. And we would always invite not just the clients back, but the couples back. And what I learned in those 10 years was, what was very unexpected to me was the majority of the couples stayed together. It was a long and a slow process, and there was a lot of therapeutic separations. There was a lot of therapeutic separations within the home. There was long periods where they might live apart and wouldn't have sex. But what was so fascinating to me was that even with that level of betrayal, there was, in so many cases, the reunion did take place. And it just gave me one more example of the possibilities of what recovery could really do. And I got to say also that the clients there that I worked with were always my favorites, because I felt like when I got to do groups with those in sex addiction, we were all kind of like little boys. You know, it was taking us back to who we really were, as Rabbi Jacobson said, you know, that beginning of identifying who we were, you know, the violations and what have you that had occurred. In most cases, it was all, and so much of it was all trauma based. And I want to go back, earlier was talked about the importance of doing family of origin work. And that was really key to my recovery. And I did that through Adult Children of Alcoholics, was a huge benefit for me. And doing a genogram and looking at my whole family and the whole family history of how addiction had come to me, sort of like this generational tsunami, you know, that was coming. It was coming, and I got it, you know, but that there was recovery, and couples recover too. But as was said, thank you for reminding Maria, it's a long and slow process, and it requires unbelievable patience. And then the recovery of both. It's not just the violator that must recover. It's the other partner as well that must be in recovery too. Thank you for reminding me.
Wow. Yeah, this is a tremendous topic. There must be healing. There must be space. Both partners need to be heard, need to hear each other. You know, and my experience with this is, oh man, it takes time. It takes time. And each person needs to heal. They have their own spiritual journey. You know, for those of us who ended up in relationships with addicted people, with addicts, you know, we were just as sick. I was just as sick. She was just as sick to end up with me. You know, there's healing that needs to take place. There's healing that needs to be done. And then this profound idea came up, particularly when Rabbi Jacobson was talking, and he's kind of touched on this several times, but there's this corruption of innocence, you know, and when the innocence in me was corrupted, what happened? I ate of that fruit. I became aware of good and evil. My pristine view of reality was corrupted, there was something distorted. And what happened in that moment when that happened was I needed to hide. I needed to hide my nakedness. I couldn't be seen as I was. I needed to hide that part of me. And what I realized, even until deep into my recovery, was that I was still hiding. There was still a part of me. I would give you a part of me. I would give her a part of me. But then there was that part of me that was only there when I was by myself. And that part of me that lived in the shadow, if you will. And what I realized was, until that shadow, until that unhealed and unintegrated part of myself was healed and integrated, I could never be my authentic self. I could never be in my truth and say what I really felt and what I really thought. I wasn't allowing it myself, and I wasn't certainly allowing it to anyone I was interacting with, particularly those whom I gave the greatest power to hurt me. You know, the more intimate I am with you, the greater power you wield in hurting me. So therefore, there's that part of me, the most vulnerable parts of myself, I must hide. And when there's that element of betrayal that comes up, and there's that rift in a relationship, and so much pain and so much hurt there, it can only come, the intimacy can only come with truth, you know, and that truth takes time, because what was really profound was I was not only hiding truth from everyone else, I was hiding truth from myself. I had never allowed myself to think them, never allowed myself to speak them. And it was only when that shadow was fully integrated and I was like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I've been through. This is what it's going to take for me to heal and to evolve as a person. Then that fullness could be brought to the table. And only then, being true to myself, could I accomplish intimacy. You know, only then could I reveal myself to another in a way that would foster knowledge and union, as was discussed. And that took years and years and years of heartache and frustration and anger, and every human emotion that could be experienced was a part of that process. But some of the most profound things that ever happened were sitting in a room with a therapist, and one person sitting and the other person speaking. And my job was to just mirror what was being said to me, you know, to give it back exactly as it was received. And then on a totally separate occasion, the roles would be exchanged, deep listening and speaking my truth and hearing the truth of another. And man, there are so many great and wise people here who have resources that are really just full of that richness that can create solutions, especially for those who are in a hopeless place. There's so much hope to be had. There's so much love and so much knowledge and so much joy to be experienced. And the people that you're here listening to, I mean, they're here for you. They're here because they understand. And they want to give of their experience and their strength and their hope because they care about you and they see themselves in you. And I feel like I'm receiving that tonight. I'm super grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I love how it always comes down to not what we're struggling with, but what's under what we're struggling with. And I think every single one of you have touched on the fact that this goes back to who we are deep inside as kids, the betrayal. And I heard a great line once that as an adult, I have choices and I am not a victim. I am only a volunteer, because adults cannot be abandoned. So as an adult, we get to make that choice. And there is no straight path. Recovery, you're either going towards recovery or towards addiction. So every step that you make, it's a choice. What is this? And sometimes playing that back in our heads of just, what is this taking me closer to, helps us have that little pause and make that choice that feels right. I'm going to end off, I'm assuming, with this last question, given that we're running out of time. And I know we could probably sit here for hours, but all good things have to come to an end. So this last question, which I know comes up often, is can the 12 steps, can spirituality, can therapy, can that turn into its own addiction? And how do we make sure that we don't cross over into that line of making that our God, and putting the emphasis on that? So for anyone that would like to jump in, I welcome that.
I'll begin if I may. I think this was said by several of us through this program. It's all about the self and getting yourself out of the way. The self can manifest in many ways. It can manifest in arrogance and pomposity. It can manifest in depression and low self-esteem. And it can manifest in being like, now, I've become the spiritual guy or girl, or I'm now in healing. I remember meeting someone, well, more than once, who, yes, she suffered a lot of abandonment, emotional abandonment, and all that comes with it throughout her childhood. And now she says to me, I said, so what's going to be now the rest of your life? She says, look, 30 years I was abandoned. Now I'm going to spend the next 30 years taking care of myself. So I said, okay, so now yourself has just manifested itself. You're rebelling against all that abandonment. Why don't you focus a little about giving and not just taking? In other words, yes, absolutely. Healing and addiction, healing, the 12-step spirituality can be, I don't know if I'd call it addiction, but it could also be another manifestation of self. And the real healing and real growth is when you get the self out of the way. Unfortunately, when we've been hurt, the self came to the surface because either we were abused, we were bullied, we were invalidated, and you had to fight for that self, or you obliterated the self. And then at some point, you re-embrace yourself, but you can never forget that the goal here is not about you. It's about what you're here to serve. That will always be the ultimate healing. As soon as you start saying it's about me, whether it's feeding yourself or depriving yourself, the self is the trap. And therefore, you need to really ask yourself, and that's why it's important to have an objective sponsor, a friend, someone that you can run by and say, look, have I become now another version of the self taking care of myself instead of really helping others? And ultimately, healing is a combination of both, because we don't want to annihilate ourselves. But I would use Hillel's words. He said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if you can keep that balance in mind, you can have the best of healing while not becoming overconsumed with you and your own needs. It's like a thirsty person who hasn't drunk for so long. So first they were deprived, and now they can't stop drinking. And they forget maybe you have to share the drink with somebody else as well. So you need to have that balance.
I love that. It just real simply, for me, the 12 steps, the 12 steps helped save my life. And, but the 12 steps didn't become my life. The 12 steps helped me gain my life. And so it really is, as the rabbi has said, it's a manifestation of a way for me to be able to give of myself to other people. So in that sense, the experiences that I had in addiction, now they have value because I can use those experiences to help me identify with other troubled people. And that gives me purpose in life. So I utilize the 12 steps to be able to help pass along healing to other people as this gift that was so generously and freely given to me, I'm able to pass on to others, and that becomes its own mission. But I see what you're talking about. You see people who the attendance of meetings, can become a bit compulsory, and can become a bit overwhelming for some. So I always think that all of that, those 12 steps, aren't my life. They help me get my life.
Well said.
Yes. Wow. For me, I think it comes back to, am I using anything to try to achieve a specific outcome? And am I So what I suffer from, and I think a lot of us suffer from, is terminal self-reliance. A belief that, like, if I don't do it, if I don't take care of me, no one will. And man, that has been the source of so much trouble for me. So many of my problems have come from that belief and that misguided belief. And sure, in recovery, it's the same in that, you know, if I think that I can just use the tools of recovery to make the world act the way that I want it to, you know, it's like in a lot of 12-step recovery that relates to relationships, it's like I go so that I can figure out how to control the other person. And the truth of the matter is, I don't know what's best for them. I don't know what's best for the world. I don't even know what's best for me 99% of the time. But in recovery, we learn what the work is. Sure, go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps, you know, go to therapy, do the inner work, heal, reach out to people, help others, teach what you've learned. But it's not to get the outcome that I'm looking for. You know, again, my desires can often be very misguided. But if I'm putting in the work and letting go of the results, that's the formula for me. Put in the work and let go of the results. I am entitled to the labor, but I'm not entitled to the fruits of my labor. You know, and that's a universal truth. That's in the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, that's in every spiritual tradition I've ever studied. Do the work. Don't worry about the good things that come. Don't worry about the negative things that come. Do the work. Focus on the practice. And yeah, I mean, Rabbi said it so beautifully, and Carver, you know, echoed the same thing. Focus on others. You know, the 12th step in recovery is very clearly about getting out of yourself, and you can't keep it unless you give it away. And I was taught, I was classically trained as a musician when I was 11 years old, and the girl who taught me at that time was only 12, and her father was a very gifted musician. And she said to me at 12 years old, you can't master anything until you teach it. I was like, okay, I'm going to remember that. And, you know, this was echoed to me through many very gifted teachers and ultimately highly enlightened spiritual masters that were just embodying that. You don't get to keep it unless you give it to someone else, unless you make it yours by letting the divine come through you and give it away. So a lot of that healing of the obsession and of the compulsory behaviors, even around recovery, are healed through that, like recognizing I'm just an instrument and this thing is coming through me and working in my life to create a world that is far beyond my imagining.
Beautiful.
Hi. Well, I just want to echo what you guys are saying about, I don't know if I would say addiction is really the problematic part with any of these things as much as it is, like what I say to my clients, if you're coming, but you're not doing any of the work, that's not going to get you anywhere. Right. And I sometimes will just say, why don't you not come back until you've done some of these homework assignments and help them understand it's about the work. Right. And the same with the 12 steps. I mean, one thing that's true in sex and love addiction, though, in that first year to 2 years, you're going to be going to a lot of meetings and you're going to be going to a lot of therapy and a lot of that stuff. And maybe to another person on the outside, it seems sort of like addictive. But it's important to surround yourself with, you know, new people and get connected with new people that are living this life of recovery. One thing I say to my clients also, though, is that, you know, especially when they're parents, for example, is make sure you're taking care of the needs of your kids and the people in your life and not doing 12-step or therapy or something in exclusion of that stuff and then creating trauma for the next generation, right? Because I do have clients sometimes who say their parent was in a 12-step program maybe and had been a little neglectful at times. So that's the only thing that kind of came to my mind a little bit is this whole topic of balance that we're talking about tonight and helping clients and anybody that's working with understand that it's all about balance, and like trading one addiction for another is not going to get you anywhere anyway, right? but you're going to have to do a lot of getting around other people that are going the right direction.
Thank you so much, everyone. So much insight, so much love and understanding and care. I'm blown away, and it was so enlightening. I think I want to just end off with one thing that I once heard in the 12-step rooms, and they said, God will do for you what you cannot do for yourself. But then I heard someone add on to that, but he will not do for you what you could do for yourself. And that's really what we have to take away, is that there's a lot of work, but there's beauty on the other side. And there's recovery, and that's our goal, is to get everyone to recovery, because recovery is a beautiful life. So I just want to take the last 10 minutes. We'll go around and everyone will just end off. And if anyone wants to leave any contact information, feel free to put it in the chat. We are so lucky and so blessed to be able to have all of these wonderful people on our team at Chrysalis Way. Unfortunately, we do not have the rabbi, although if we can, please, we'd love to have you. I don't know what we could have you do, but you are, the insight that you have. Every time I speak to you, I don't even know what to say. I'm at loss for words, and I usually talk a lot, so that's saying something. But Maria, Carver, and Joe are all on our team, and we're so excited with what we've put together. And our goal, I think all of us together, is let's help more people. Let's empower them to be themselves, because in reality, each and every one of you are special in your own way. So if anyone has any questions about what we offer right now, we have a mental health track. We have a loss and renewal track. We put together this sex addiction track. And it's completely virtual. And our reason for doing virtual is so that way we can get some phenomenal people on our team. As you see, everyone here is just from all over the US. And the second reason is because struggling with this is hard, but to have to go away from your families, from your homes, from your jobs makes it even harder. So this way, everything is virtual, and our program is there to help you. I'll go around and everyone can just tell us how to get in touch with you if we have any questions. And again, feel free to reach out to me, or you could look us up on our website at hopestreetheals.com. So Rabbi Jacobson, if you want to just end off, I would love that.
Sure. So again, what an honor. There's really nothing more beautiful and refined and truth when people are vulnerable and we talk about and don't conceal or hide and cover up our pain and our challenges and our traumas. So I always feel coming away from any type of conversation like this, really, I guess I don't want to use the word cleansed, but somewhat pure, especially in this world. There's so much toxic stuff out there on so many levels, political, emotional, psychological, in this whole COVID period we're going through. So it's really, I want to just thank everybody for that. I feel like I've come through a ritual bath, been saturated with honesty. And sometimes they say the ugly truth is a lot more beautiful than a beautiful lie. So not ugly, obviously in a negative way, but I mean sometimes things that are not pleasant are far more beautiful when you talk about them than the so-called cosmetic or packaged goods that we're so accustomed to. I really like the Chrysalis name, the Chrysalis Way. You know, the chrysalis, of course, is about a metamorphosis from the moth, from the caterpillar to the butterfly, and reminds me of that famous story they tell, that when the butterfly was starting to emerge from the chrysalis, from the cocoon, so there was a so-called empathetic individual who wanted to help the butterfly get through its struggles, because it was trying to struggle through the cocoon. And he took a knife and cut open the cocoon, and the butterfly emerged, a beautiful monarch butterfly. But to his chagrin, the butterfly did not take flight, and it never would take flight. because in his misplaced compassion, what he did was to not allow the butterfly to struggle. That struggle allows the liquid to get into the wings of the butterfly and gives it aerodynamics that it allows it to fly. So life and growth is inevitably going to be connected, like was said so beautifully by you, Shana, and by others in this discussion. It's connected to struggle and to effort. And effort actually gets that liquid, that pressure of resistance, creates strengths and resilience that allows us to soar and fly in great places. So it's not about avoiding it, it's about allowing it to be harnessed. And finally, I want to say, in context of our last question, and I echo again, the greatest way to heal in the area of love and sexuality is to give love. Healing is not about a selfishness. It's not about selfish taking care of yourself. Giving love and learning how to love in a healthy way is ultimately the greatest redemption and the beautiful result of true recovery. And I thank you again. To reach me, I have a website, meaningfullife.com. I posted it earlier on the chat. You go to meaningfullife.com, a full array of resources that address issues like this, and as well as a schedule of events. I'm doing a lot of online virtual events, and please, I'm accessible. See me as a friend, an ally, a brother, a comrade, a kindred spirit. And I thank you again, my co-panelists here, and Shana, for making this happen. I would love to stay in touch with you guys as well.
Well, I'll just quickly echo, my sentiments too. Just thank you all. This has just been a delightful time. And I feel like in a way, this thing we've talked about carrying the message and being of service, we're actually demonstrating that tonight. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you all for who have listened in and participated. And I love you all, and we will meet again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining in. And my name is Maria Wesley-Pinion. I have a website, mariawesleypinion.com, if you're in Texas. And that's it. I have really enjoyed all that we have shared. I have just don't want to say it again, but to echo you guys, I feel enlightened, and like the butterfly, like the caterpillar coming out of that's really going to stick with me, I think.
Thank you guys so very much, all of you, the panelists and all the attendees, and Shana, thank you, and Loren, thank you for putting this together. Really beautiful to be on such a divine subject. I too believe that the answer is, as Rabbi so beautifully put it, to give love. There's a type of love that doesn't require anything in return, where I can give of myself selflessly, and where I receive you exactly as you are. And both of those things are giving love. And that's a type of love that I aspire on a daily basis to give. And when we're addicted to, people and places and things, this seems to be the ultimate healing that comes as a result of the long journey through recovery. Again, my wife and I are the owners of Yoga Veda Center, VEDA. I'll include our email in the chat as well. We're hosting Ayurvedic and yoga and meditation-based retreats, and obviously we're pretty deeply rooted in 12-step recovery, and we love to intertwine that into the spiritual narrative that's related to the ancient tradition of yoga and Ayurveda. So with that, thank you very much.
Shana, if I may ask, will there be playback? Some people are writing to me and asking.
Yes. So we are recording this, and we will upload it to YouTube. Give me a day or two to get that up, and then absolutely, we will send out the link for everyone.
Great.
To share. And Rabbi Jacobson, I see a few messages about what your website is. If you don't mind putting it in the chat as well, again, that would be great.
I will.
And I just wanted to just take a minute and first of all, thank each and every one of the panelists for joining. I always say that when you give someone your time, you're giving a part of your life that you can never get back. So to me, this is one of the nicest things you guys all could have done. So thank you for your time tonight. And I want to thank Loren, because without Loren, this never would have happened. So Loren put this all together, and she really went above and beyond in making sure that everything went smoothly. So Loren, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to you to just say your goodbyes. But thank you, everyone, and I'm looking forward to many more of these.
Well, yes, again, thanks everybody for coming. Shana, that was so nice. Appreciate you and I did this together. Everybody stay tuned for probably do these monthly. And then tomorrow, y'all will receive a follow-up email with all the evaluation links, CE certificate, all that good stuff, YouTube link for, with the recording. So thank you everybody again. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you very much. Be well, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.